I'm Ruby, 28 years old, and what I discovered that afternoon changed everything. I'd left the wedding venue early after our florist canceled last minute. Seeing my sister Chloe's car in our driveway seemed normal enough, but the sounds from upstairs weren't. Steam escaped under the bathroom door, and when I pushed it open, there they were. My sister, my fiancé Marcus, together in our bathtub. As their faces turned white with panic, I stepped back, slid the skeleton key into the lock, and turned it. Before I tell you how I destroyed them both, let me know where you're watching from, and please subscribe to hear what happened next. 3 years ago, I met Marcus at our mutual friend Jessica's birthday party. He walked in with that confidence that made everyone turn their heads. 32 years old, worked in pharmaceutical sales, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he talked to you. Our first conversation lasted until 4 in the morning, discussing everything from our favorite books to our dreams of traveling through Southeast Asia. He pursued me with this intensity that felt like something out of a movie. Good morning texts that actually said something meaningful. Surprise lunch deliveries to my office when I mentioned having a rough day. He remembered every little detail I told him, like how I preferred lavender lattes over regular ones, or how I always wore my grandmother's pearl earrings when I needed extra confidence. 6 months into dating, he moved into my townhouse. Everything felt so natural, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. He'd cook dinner while I worked late on presentations. We'd spend Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, him carrying the bags, while I picked out fresh flowers for our dining table. My friends kept saying they'd never seen me so happy, so settled, so sure about someone. The proposal came exactly 6 months ago at Marcello's, the Italian restaurant where we'd had our third date. He'd arranged for the whole place to be decorated with fairy lights and white roses. Got down on one knee right as they brought out the tiramisu. The ring was perfect, a vintage Art Deco piece he'd found at an estate sale because he knew I loved things with history. Everyone in the restaurant applauded. I said yes before he even finished asking. Then there's my sister Chloe, 26 years old, 2 years younger than me, but you'd think she was still 16 from how my parents treated her. The golden child who could do no wrong. While I graduated summa cum laude and landed a management position at a Fortune 500 company, Chloe dropped out of art school twice and moved back home. But somehow at every family dinner, the conversation always centered on her latest creative endeavor or how hard things were for her sensitive artistic soul. Growing up, the difference in treatment was obvious. I got straight A's and my parents would say, "Good job," then ask why I got an A- in calculus. Chloe would paint something that looked like a kindergartner's finger painting and they'd act like she was the next Picasso. I paid my way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. Chloe got a blank check for her artistic journey, including the apartment in Brooklyn she abandoned after 3 months because the energy wasn't right. The pattern never changed. When I bought my townhouse at 25, my mother's first comment was about how Chloe would love the spare bedroom for an art studio. When I got promoted to regional manager, my father spent the celebration dinner talking about how corporate success wasn't everything and creative souls like Chloe's were what really mattered in life. Chloe had this way of inserting herself into everything good in my life. My high school graduation party became about her middle school art show award. My college acceptance letter day turned into consoling her about some boy who'd broken up with her. Even my promotion celebration got hijacked when she announced she was thinking about maybe possibly applying to art school again. But when I got engaged, something shifted in her. Suddenly she was interested in every wedding planning detail. She volunteered to help with flower arrangements, insisted on coming to dress shopping, even offered to design our wedding invitations for free. I thought maybe she was finally growing up, finally wanting to be the supportive sister I'd always hoped for. The signs were there looking back. Marcus started working late about 2 months ago, always with perfectly reasonable explanations. Big pharmaceutical conference coming up. New product launch requiring extra preparation. His boss breathing down his neck about quarterly numbers. I didn't question it because why would I trust is the foundation of marriage, right? Chloe started dropping by more often, always when Marcus happened to be home. She'd claim she was in the neighborhood, needed to borrow something, wanted to show us her latest painting. They developed these little inside jokes I didn't understand. She'd mentioned some TV show they both watched that I'd never heard of. He'd reference conversations they'd had that I wasn't part of. At family dinners, I started noticing things. The way she'd laugh a little too hard at his stories. How he'd automatically refill her wine glass before anyone else's. They'd sit across from each other, and sometimes I'd catch these looks between them, quick glances they thought no one would notice. 3 weeks ago, Chloe asked to borrow my spare house key. Said she might need to crash sometimes when things got tense with our parents. I gave it to her without thinking twice. She was my sister. We were finally building something like a real relationship. Why wouldn't I help her out? Last week, Marcus's phone rang while he was in the shower. The name that flashed was saved as Mike from work, but the text preview showed heart emojis. When I mentioned it later casually, he laughed and said Mike's girlfriend had grabbed his phone as a joke. It made sense at the time. Marcus and his coworkers were always pulling pranks on each other. That morning started with such promise. I woke up early, made Marcus his favorite breakfast scrambled eggs with extra cheese and turkey bacon. He kissed me goodbye, said he loved me, mentioned he might be late because of a client dinner. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would make me suspect this would be the day everything imploded. The florist called around 11. There'd been a mix-up with our order double booking situation. Could I come in person to sort it out? The shop was only 10 minutes from home, so I figured I'd handle it quickly, then surprise Marcus with lunch since my afternoon was now free. Maybe we could finally talk about the honeymoon plans we'd been putting off. Driving home, I stopped at his favorite sandwich shop. Got the Italian sub he always ordered, extra peppers, no onions. Grabbed 2 bottles of that craft beer he'd been wanting to try. I was actually excited thinking about how we never got spontaneous lunch dates anymore with all the wedding planning stress. Both cars in the driveway didn't raise red flags initially. Chloe had been dropping by to work on the invitation designs. Marcus sometimes came home for lunch when clients canceled. If anything, I thought maybe I'd interrupted a wedding surprise they were planning together. The thought actually made me smile as I unlocked the front door. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, except for the sound of running water from upstairs. Chloe's purse sat on the kitchen counter next to her phone screen down. Marcus's jacket hung on the chair instead of the coat rack like he'd tossed it there in a hurry. His shoes were kicked off by the door, one upside down. I set down the sandwiches, moving quietly, though I didn't know why. Something in my gut told me to be careful, that same instinct that makes you freeze when you hear a strange noise at night. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, and I heard voices mixing with the water sound. Muffled, but definitely voices. The master bedroom door stood open. Marcus's work clothes lay scattered on the floor, his lucky client meeting tie draped over the dresser. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, steam billowing out in small puffs. I could see the mirror completely fogged over, condensation running down in little rivers. I pushed the door open, expecting maybe a burst pipe, expecting anything except what I saw. My sister was in my bathtub in my home with my fiancé. The water barely covered them. His hands were in her hair. Her legs were wrapped around him. The lavender bath salts I'd been saving for our wedding night floated around them like confetti at someone else's celebration. Time stopped. Actually stopped. I could see individual water droplets on the shower curtain. Could count the bottles of my expensive shampoo Chloe was leaning against. Could read the label on the wine bottle they'd brought into the tub, the Pinot Noir we'd been saving for our first anniversary. Their faces turned toward me in slow motion. Marcus's expression shifted from pleasure to shock to fear in the span of a heartbeat. Chloe's mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish gasping for air. Water sloshed as they tried to separate, to cover themselves, to do something, anything to make this not what it obviously was. Marcus found his voice first, stuttering out my name like a question, like maybe I wasn't really there. His hand reached toward me, dripping water on the bath mat I'd bought last week. The bath mat I'd specifically chosen because it matched our bedroom colors. The bedroom where we made love just this morning before breakfast. Chloe started crying immediately, those fake tears she'd perfected since childhood. The same tears that got her out of trouble for breaking my things, for stealing my birthday money, for telling lies about me to our parents. But this time, the tears mixed with the bath water running down her face made her mascara streak black lines like prison bars. My body moved without my brain's permission. I stepped backward out of the bathroom, my hand finding the skeleton key that hung on the little hook outside the door. The old house had these antique locks on all the bathrooms, something the previous owners had installed for child safety. We joked about them, said we'd replace them eventually, but never got around to it. The key slid into the lock smoothly. The click echoed louder than the running water, louder than their sudden shouts of alarm. I turned it twice, heard the bolt slide home, tested the handle to make sure it was secure. Their voices rose immediately, calling my name, trying to explain, begging me to wait. But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind had shifted into a different gear entirely. Not the hot rage I might have expected. Not the devastating grief that would probably come later. Instead, this icy clarity descended like when you solve a complex problem at work and suddenly see all the steps laid out perfectly. My grandmother used to say, revenge was a dish best served cold. She'd survived her own husband's betrayal back in the 60s when women had no recourse. She rebuilt her life from ashes, raised 4 kids alone, and died with more dignity in her little finger than he'd had in his whole body. Her voice echoed in my head now, calm and assured, telling me to think, to plan, to make it count. Walking downstairs, I ignored the increasing volume from the bathroom. Marcus had switched from confusion to anger, demanding I open the door immediately. Chloe's cries had become more frantic, claiming claustrophobia, begging for mercy. The door rattled as they tried the handle repeatedly. Then came the thudding of Marcus, probably shoulder-checking it. But that door was solid oak, installed when the house was built in 1923. The frame was reinforced steel from renovations in the 80s. They weren't getting out unless I let them out, and I had no intention of doing that anytime soon. Let them sit in their shame soup while I figured out exactly how to serve this cold dish my grandmother would have been proud of. Chloe's phone on the counter beckoned like a neon sign. No password, because of course she couldn't be bothered with basic security. The Messages app opened to her conversation with someone named Mark with a black heart emoji. Mark. Not even creative enough to use a proper fake name for my fiancé in her contacts. 3 months. 3 entire months of messages scrolled before my eyes. Started right after my promotion announcement, when I'd had to travel more for work. Pictures that made my stomach turn. Not just nude photos, but photos in my bed, in my shower, wearing my lingerie. Messages about how boring I was, how easy it was to fool me, how Marcus was only marrying me for my money and stability. Screenshots. I took screenshots of everything. Sent them to my email, to my cloud storage, to my best friend Lauren with a message to save everything. The evidence mounted with every swipe. Hotel receipts charged to the credit card I paid half of. Dinner reservations at restaurants he'd told me were client meetings. A whole secret Instagram account where they posted couple photos with their faces hidden, but my house clearly visible in the backgrounds. Marcus's jacket pockets revealed even more. The receipt for my engagement ring, which I expected, but also a return receipt from 2 weeks later for the exact same amount. He'd bought it, showed it to everyone, then returned it and bought a cheaper version. The difference probably funded their little hotel escapades. Business cards for apartment complexes downtown circled prices for studios' move-in specials highlighted. A credit card statement I'd never seen before showed charges at lingerie stores, jewelry shops, restaurants I'd never been to, all dated during his supposed late work nights and client dinners. The card was in his name only, but the billing address was his mother's house, hiding financial infidelity along with the physical kind. Chloe's journal sat in her purse because she still carried a journal like the tortured artist she pretended to be. The entries about Marcus started 4 months ago. Detailed descriptions of their encounters that read like bad erotica. But worse were the parts about me. How pathetic I was for not noticing. How I deserved it for always making her look bad by being successful. How this was finally her turn to have something better than mine. The water heater was in the basement. I descended the stairs with purpose, found the switch, and flipped it off. Let them enjoy their romantic bath turning into an ice bucket challenge. The temperature would drop gradually, giving them time to really think about their choices while their teeth chattered. Back upstairs, I made my first phone call. Nancy, the locksmith we'd used when we first moved in. Explained I'd had a security concern needed, all the locks changed immediately, would pay triple for emergency service. She said she'd be there in 30 minutes with her whole crew. Perfect timing. The second call went to Marcus's mother, Patricia. She answered on the first ring, always eager to talk to her future daughter-in-law. I kept my voice concerned but calm, told her Marcus seemed to be having some kind of breakdown, that she might want to come over. She said she'd bring his sister Caroline too for support. Even better. Tom, Chloe's boyfriend of 8 months, deserved to know next. I sent him the screenshots without commentary at first, then followed up with a simple message about him deserving better. His response was immediate and heartbroken. He'd been ring shopping. Had shown Chloe's mom pictures just last week. The poor guy was planning to propose on her birthday next month. The family group chat was trickier. I needed to be strategic, not hysterical. Started with concern about Chloe not answering her phone, mentioned her car was here, but she wasn't responding. Let the panic build naturally, as parents and aunts and cousins started chiming in with worry. Then dropped that Marcus was also unreachable. Let them draw their own conclusions about why that might be significant. Social media required more finesse. I scheduled posts for 2 hours from now across all platforms. Simple, dignified announcements about the wedding being canceled due to discovered incompatibilities. No details, no blame, just enough to make people curious. The comment sections would explode with speculation, and eventually the truth would come out, but not from me directly. Marcus's boss, Richard, was next on my list. Left a voicemail about a family emergency, how Marcus might miss the big presentation tomorrow with their Japanese clients. The presentation he'd been preparing for 3 months. The one that would determine his promotion and bonus. Such a shame he'd have to miss it, but family emergencies couldn't be helped. Upstairs, the water had stopped running. They were conserving what warmth remained, probably. Their voices carried through the door, alternating between pleading with me and arguing with each other, blaming each other for getting caught, fighting about whose idea it had been to use our house instead of hotels. Music to my ears. The doorbell rang right on schedule. Nancy and her team got to work immediately, professional and efficient. I explained about a stalker situation, how I needed everything changed for safety. They didn't question it, just started with the front door and worked their way through. The noise of drills and hammers provided a nice soundtrack to the increasingly desperate sounds from upstairs. When they got to the master bedroom, I asked them to change that lock too, but leave the bathroom for last. Told them someone was using it, and we'd handle that one separately. Nancy gave me a look that said she knew something was up, but wasn't going to ask questions. Professional discretion was why I'd called her specifically. 2 hours had passed since I'd locked that door. The water had long since turned frigid, and their voices had taken on a different quality. Less anger, more desperation. Marcus had tried the authority approach about an hour and threatening legal action, saying this was false imprisonment. Chloe had cycled through every manipulation tactic in her playbook, from tears to rage to faking medical emergencies. But now, thinking I'd left, they'd started talking to each other. Really talking. And I stood outside the door with my phone recording every word through the gap at the bottom. The conversation was more revealing than any physical evidence I'd found. Marcus's voice shivering, but clear-cut through the silence first. He complained about the cold, about how this was all Chloe's fault for insisting they meet here today. She snapped back that it was his idea to use the bathtub, that he'd said I was too stupid to notice anything anyway. That word stupid echoed in the hallway where I stood. He laughed, then this bitter sound I'd never heard from him before. Talked about how he'd never really loved me, how I was just convenient. Good job, good credit, good family connections. The marriage was supposed to be his ticket to respectability, while he kept having fun on the side. He'd done it before, would do it again, had a whole system worked out. Chloe's response was even worse. She detailed how she'd targeted him specifically to hurt me, how she'd researched what he liked, pretended to be interested in his hobbies, manufactured the connection. It wasn't even about him. It was about finally having something I wanted, finally being chosen over me, finally winning after years of being compared to perfect Ruby. They discussed their plan to continue after the wedding. Marcus would have access to my inherited trust fund after marriage. Chloe would play the supportive sister, always around, always available. They'd figured I'd be too busy with work to notice patterns, too trusting to question inconsistencies, too proud to admit failure, even if I suspected. The recording captured Chloe mocking my excitement about the wedding. How pathetic I looked trying on dresses thinking I'd found true love. She imitated my voice talking about Marcus being the one, and they both laughed. The sound was like glass in my chest, but I kept recording. Every word was another nail in their coffins. Marcus mentioned the apartment he'd been looking at. Already put down a deposit using money he'd been skimming from our joint account. Small amounts I'd never notice. The plan was to have somewhere to meet that I'd never know about. He'd tell me it was for work, a corporate apartment for late nights. I'd believe it because I believed everything. They talked about other people they'd involved. Marcus's friend Jake, who'd covered for him multiple times. Chloe's roommate from her brief college stint, who'd provided alibis. A whole network of people who knew and said nothing who enabled this betrayal. I made notes of every name, every detail. They'd all face consequences too. Then came the truly sick part. They discussed my reaction when I'd eventually find out. Because they wanted me to find out, just not yet. After a baby or two, when leaving would be harder. When I'd be more likely to stay for the children. They'd counted on my family values, my desire for stability, my fear of failure. They'd mapped out my psychological profile like I was a mark in a long con. The sound of car doors outside interrupted their conversation. Multiple cars arriving at once. I looked out the bedroom window to see Patricia's Mercedes, my parents' Volvo Tom's pickup truck, and several other familiar vehicles. The family cavalry had arrived, drawn by concerned messages and unanswered phones. My mother reached the door first, knocking frantically. I went downstairs to let her in, schooling my face into worried confusion. Told her Chloe's car was here, but I couldn't find her anywhere. Let the panic in her voice escalate as she called Chloe's phone, hearing it ring from the kitchen counter. My father arrived next, then Patricia with Caroline, then Tom looking destroyed. Within minutes, my living room filled with concerned family members. I played my part perfectly, the worried sister and fiancé. Suggested maybe they'd gone for a walk and left their phones. Offered to make coffee while we waited. Maintained just the right level of concern without tipping into hysteria. The voices from upstairs grew louder once they heard the commotion below. Shouting for help, claiming I'd locked them in, demanding someone come let them out. The sound carried down through the vents, getting clearer as people stopped talking to listen. My mother's face went white as she recognized Chloe's voice. Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to horror as Marcus's shouts became distinct. I led the parade upstairs, maintaining my confused act until the last second. As we reached the bathroom door, I pulled out my phone and played the recording of their conversation. Every sick word echoed in the hallway as family members realized what they were hearing. My mother's hand covered her mouth. My father's face turned purple with rage. Patricia started crying. Tom punched the wall, leaving a hole I'd have to patch later. When the recording finished, silence fell except for the renewed desperate pleas from behind the door. Marcus trying to explain it was taken out of context. Chloe sobbing that I'd set them up. Both of them begging for anyone to let them out. But nobody moved. They all looked at me waiting. I finally spoke, voice steady and calm. Explained how I'd come home early, found them together, and locked the door while I processed what to do. How I'd found evidence of months of deception. How I'd wanted them to understand consequences before I let them face them. The family stood frozen, processing the betrayal alongside me. Patricia broke first, her disgust with her son evident in every word as she called him a disappointment to his late father. Caroline added that she'd suspected something but hadn't wanted to cause problems. She apologized to me, genuinely remorseful for not speaking up. I told her it wasn't her fault that the betrayal belonged solely to the two people shivering in cold bath water. My parents' reaction was the most surprising. My mother, who'd always favored Chloe, looked physically ill. She kept shaking her head, muttering about where she'd gone wrong. My father, usually so passive, was practically vibrating with rage. For the first time in my life, I saw him look at the bathroom door with something approaching hatred. Tom's reaction broke my heart. He pulled out the ring he'd bought, showed it to everyone, then walked to the bathroom door and slid it underneath. Told Chloe she could consider that her severance package from their relationship. His family had money. The ring was worth at least $15,000. She could pawn it for first month's rent, somewhere far away from all of us. More people arrived as word spread through the family grapevine. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. Each one heard the story, either from me or from others who'd already heard. The consensus was unanimous. Marcus and Chloe had betrayed not just me but the entire family's trust. They'd made fools of everyone who'd welcomed them, supported them, loved them. Marcus's extended family started arriving too, called by Patricia. His uncle, a lawyer, advised me to document everything for potential legal proceedings. His aunt, who'd hosted our engagement party, offered to help me recoup deposits from wedding vendors. His cousins, who'd been groomsmen, said they'd handle getting his stuff out of my house. The betrayal had rippled out, affecting everyone. The cascading consequences started immediately. While family filled my house, phones buzzed with notifications as my scheduled social media posts went live. Within minutes, comments and messages poured in. The vague nature of my announcement had people speculating wildly, but those who knew started filling in details. The truth spread faster than any lie could have. Marcus's boss, Richard, called back, having received my voicemail. The concern in his voice was genuine as he asked if everything was all right. I explained that Marcus was dealing with a personal crisis that would likely impact his work availability. Richard's silence spoke volumes before he mentioned that reliability was crucial for the upcoming promotion. Such a shame if Marcus couldn't maintain professional standards during personal difficulties. The $1 million presentation to the Japanese clients was tomorrow morning. Marcus had been lead on the project for 6 months. Nobody else knew the material well enough to present effectively. Missing it wouldn't just cost him the promotion, it would likely trigger a performance review. In pharmaceutical sales, reputation was everything. One major fumble could haunt a career for years. Meanwhile, Tom had made a call of his own. His father owned the gallery where Chloe was supposed to have her first solo exhibition next month. The conversation was brief but decisive. The exhibition was canceled, effective immediately. The gallery space would be offered to another artist, someone who understood that character mattered as much as talent in the art world. My phone rang with a call from Madison, my best friend since college. She'd received my screenshots and immediately went into crisis management mode. As a social media manager for a major firm, she knew how to control narratives. She'd already started strategically sharing information in key places, ensuring the story would be told accurately with me as the wronged party who handled things with dignity. The locksmith finished their work, handing me a complete set of new keys. I paid them in cash, tipped generously, and thanked them for their discretion. Nancy paused at the door, looked me in the eye, and said she hoped things worked out for me. Professional to the end, but human enough to recognize pain when she saw it. Back in the living room, my family had formed a council of war. My mother, finally showing maternal instinct toward the right daughter, was on the phone with Chloe's landlord. Apparently, I wasn't the only one co-signing leases. She was removing herself as guarantor, effective immediately. Without that backup, Chloe's already spotty payment history would likely result in eviction. My father had walked outside to Marcus's car, still parked in my driveway. He didn't damage it, he wasn't that type, but he did place a printed copy of the screenshots under the windshield wiper. Every neighbor who passed would see them, would understand why Marcus's belongings were being loaded into boxes and placed on the lawn. Patricia had progressed from tears to rage. She called Marcus's father's family, the ones with old pharmaceutical money, who'd always looked down on her for being working class, told them exactly what their golden boy had done. The family reputation Marcus had been so careful to cultivate was crumbling with each phone call she made. Caroline took charge of the practical matters. She directed cousins and friends in packing Marcus's things, making sure nothing was damaged, but also ensuring everything was out. His expensive suits went into garbage bags. His prized watch collection got tossed in a cardboard box. The engagement photos we'd had professionally taken were left in their frames but turned face down in the pile. Tom's friends arrived to help him get Chloe's things from his apartment. They worked quietly, efficiently, putting her belongings in boxes marked with large red X's. The kind of marking that said these items were contaminated, unwanted, rejected. He'd already changed his locks, blocked her on everything, begun the process of erasing her from his life. The family group chat exploded with messages as extended relatives learned the news. Aunts who'd bought wedding gifts demanded receipts to return them. Uncles who'd offered to help with wedding setup withdrew their support. Cousins who'd been excited about being in the wedding party expressed relief at not having to pretend Marcus was good enough for me. 4 hours had passed since I'd locked that door. The water had long since drained, leaving them sitting in an empty tub. Their voices had gone hoarse from shouting. Occasionally I heard Chloe's teeth chattering or Marcus cursing. The bathroom window was cracked open for ventilation, ensuring they had air, but also letting in the cold December breeze. Finally, I decided it was time. The family gathered in the hallway as I approached the door with the key. Before unlocking it, I made an announcement. They would walk out, get dressed in the clothes someone would hand them, and leave immediately. Any attempts at explanation, justification, or apology would be met with legal action. The restraining orders were already being prepared by Marcus's uncle, the lawyer. The lock clicked open. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door slowly opened, and they emerged, shriveled like prunes from the water, shivering from the cold. Chloe's elaborate makeup had long since washed away, leaving her looking young and pathetic. Marcus's usual confidence had disappeared, replaced by something hollow and defeated. Chloe's towel, the one she tried to wrap around herself, slipped as she walked. Nobody moved to help her. She had to clutch it with both hands, shuffling past our parents, who looked at her like a stranger. Our mother turned away. Our father's disappointment was palpable. The golden child had tarnished beyond recognition. Marcus tried to maintain some dignity, walking out with his shoulders back despite being naked and wet. But when he saw his mother's face, something broke in him. Patricia looked at him with such disgust, such complete rejection, that he actually stumbled. Caroline threw clothes at him, not to him, and told him he had 5 minutes to dress and leave. The walk of shame continued downstairs. Family members lined the path like a gauntlet of judgment. Nobody spoke, but everyone stared. These people who'd celebrated our engagement, who'd been planning to celebrate our wedding, now witnessed the spectacular destruction of everything they'd believed in. Chloe dressed quickly in the clothes thrown at her, basic jeans and a sweatshirt from the donation pile in my garage. Her designer clothes were already boxed up, waiting by the door. She tried to speak to our mother, but Mom held up her hand and walked away. The first time in Chloe's life, she'd been denied maternal comfort. Marcus put on the clothes in silence, his hands shaking as he buttoned the shirt. His phone, which someone had retrieved from the bedroom, showed dozens of missed calls and messages. Word was spreading through his professional network. His carefully maintained image was dissolving in real time. They were escorted to the door by Tom and my father. Both men were silent, but their presence was threatening enough. The message was clear. Leave now and don't come back. Any attempt to return would be met with more than just locked doors. As they walked out, I stood at the window watching. Marcus's car had been decorated by someone, probably neighborhood kids who'd seen the drama. Silly string and shaving cream spelled out "cheater" across the windshield. Chloe's boxes were getting rained on the cardboard, already starting to sag. Neither of them looked back as they drove away in their separate cars. 2 weeks passed in a blur of consequences and revelations. Marcus's professional life imploded spectacularly. Missing the Japanese client presentation had been just the beginning. When word of why he'd missed it reached the office, Human Resources launched an investigation. Turns out several female colleagues came forward with complaints they'd been too scared to file before. His expense account showed irregularities. His sales numbers were audited and found to be inflated. The termination letter arrived at his mother's house where he'd been staying. Fired for cause meant no severance, no references, and no unemployment benefits. His reputation in the pharmaceutical industry, which was smaller than people realized, was thoroughly destroyed. Every company he applied to somehow heard the story. Small industry, big gossip. Chloe's attempt at damage control failed miserably. She posted a long social media rant about how I'd always been jealous of her, how I'd set her up, how this was all a misunderstanding. Madison, my social media expert friend, systematically dismantled every claim with receipts. Screenshots of messages where Chloe admitted to targeting Marcus. Photos with timestamps proving the affair timeline. The court of public opinion delivered its verdict swiftly. The art community, which Chloe had spent years trying to break into, closed ranks against her. Turns out sleeping with your sister's fiancé was the kind of character flaw that made people question everything about you. Her artist friends distanced themselves. Her mentor, a respected painter who'd been guiding her career, dropped her completely. The small gallery shows she'd worked years to get into suddenly had no space for her work. She lost her job at the boutique coffee shop when customers started recognizing her from the viral story. Yes, it had gone viral. Someone had compiled the screenshots and evidence into a Twitter thread that got hundreds of thousands of views. Chloe became a meme about toxic sisters. Her face was recognizable enough that even chain coffee shops wouldn't hire her. The financial consequences hit them both hard. Marcus had been living beyond his means for years, maintaining an image his salary couldn't support. Without employment and with legal fees mounting, he had to sell his car and move back to his hometown in Ohio. The last I heard, he was working at his uncle's insurance company, making a third of his previous salary. Chloe's situation was worse. Our parents completely cut her off financially for the first time in her life. No more supplemented rent, no more grocery money, no more art supply allowances. The trust fund our grandparents had left, which was controlled by our parents until we turned 30, was restructured to exclude her entirely. 25 years of financial safety net disappeared overnight. Tom, sweet Tom, who'd almost proposed, found happiness surprisingly quickly. He met someone at a support group for people who'd been cheated on. They bonded over their shared experiences and started dating within a month. 3 months later, he proposed with the same ring Chloe had rejected. His new fiancée said yes, and their wedding was beautiful. I attended and cried happy tears for him. My parents went to therapy, finally addressing the favoritism that had poisoned our family dynamics for decades. Mom had a breakdown when she realized how her treatment of me had contributed to Chloe's entitlement. Dad discovered anger he'd been suppressing for years, furious at himself for enabling the golden child narrative. They apologized to me repeatedly, trying to make amends for years of imbalance. The extended family rallied around me in ways I'd never expected. Aunts who'd barely spoken to me before called regularly to check in. Cousins offered to help with house repairs where Tom had punched the wall. Grandma's sister, 93 years old, called to tell me I'd handled things exactly right, that I'd honored the family name by standing up for myself. Marcus tried to contact me once about a month after everything happened. A long email full of apologies and explanations claiming Chloe had seduced him, that he'd made a mistake, that we could work through this. I forwarded it to his mother without responding. Patricia replied, all telling him he was no longer her son and to never contact any of us again. Chloe made several attempts at reconciliation, showed up at my office with flowers, but security escorted her out. Sent letters to my home, which I returned unopened. Had mutual friends try to intercede, but they quickly learned I wasn't interested in healing that relationship. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. The wedding vendors, surprisingly, were incredibly supportive. When they heard what happened, most offered full refunds, despite contracts saying otherwise. The venue turned my deposit into credit for corporate events, which my company used for our annual party. The florist sent me a beautiful arrangement with a card saying she hoped I'd find real love someday. The photographer deleted all our engagement photos at my request and refunded the entire amount. At work, my handling of the situation actually elevated my standing. My boss, a woman who'd built her career on tough decisions, said I'd shown exceptional crisis management skills. The promotion I'd been working toward came through ahead of schedule. The raise was substantial enough that I didn't need a second income to maintain my lifestyle. I redecorated the entire house, exorcising memories from every room. The bathroom where I'd found them was completely renovated, the old tub replaced with a modern shower. The bedroom got new everything from furniture to paint color. It cost a fortune, but was worth every penny for the peace of mind. Marcus's belongings that he hadn't collected were donated to charity. His expensive watches and electronics raised several $1,000s for a women's shelter. His designer suits went to a program that helped men getting out of prison find jobs. Even his possessions could do more good without him than with him. 6 months after that horrible day, I was thriving in ways I hadn't expected. My career had skyrocketed. My family relationships were healthier than they'd ever been. My friends' circle pruned of people who'd known about the affair and said nothing was smaller but infinitely more trustworthy. I'd lost weight from all the stress initially, but then gained it back in muscle from taking up kickboxing. The first genuinely good day came about 3 months after everything exploded. I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about Marcus or Chloe for an entire 24 hours. My first thought wasn't about betrayal or revenge or pain. It was about the presentation I was giving at work, the trip I was planning with Lauren, the new recipe I wanted to try for dinner. Normal thoughts. Healthy thoughts. Therapy helped tremendously. My therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patricia Winters, helped me understand patterns I'd been blind to my whole life. How I'd been programmed to accept less than I deserved. How Chloe's treatment had actually been abuse disguised as sibling rivalry. How Marcus had targeted me precisely because he recognized someone who'd been trained to ignore red flags. We worked through the childhood dynamics that had set me up for this. Every time Chloe had gotten away with hurting me while I got punished for reacting. Every time my achievements were minimized while her failures were excused. Every time I was told to be the bigger person to forgive and forget to keep the peace. All of it had conditioned me to accept disrespect. But we also worked on recognizing my strength. The fact that when pushed to my limit, I didn't crumble or lash out violently. I'd been strategic, calculated, and effective. I'd protected myself while ensuring consequences for those who'd wronged me. Dr. Winters called it a textbook example of healthy anger properly channeled. The dating moratorium I'd imposed on myself turned into a journey of self-discovery. I took solo trips to places Marcus had always dismissed as boring. Museums he'd said were pretentious. Hiking trails he'd claimed were too difficult. Broadway shows he'd called waste of money. Each experience without his negative voice in my ear showed me how much I'd been limiting myself. I joined groups based on my actual interests, not things I thought would make me seem interesting to partners. A book club that focused on mystery novels, not the literary fiction Marcus had insisted was the only worthy reading. A cooking class for Thai cuisine which Marcus had hated, but I'd always loved. A hiking group for women that met every weekend to explore local trails. Through these groups, I met people who liked me for me. Not for my stability or my earning potential or what I could do for them. Just for my terrible jokes and my obsession with true crime podcasts and my ability to identify birds by their songs. It was refreshing to be valued for qualities that had nothing to do with being useful to someone else. 6 months after the incident, Chloe showed up at our grandmother's grave. I was placing fresh flowers like I did every month when I saw her there. She looked terrible. Hair, unwashed clothes wrinkled the designer handbag she'd always carried, replaced with a plastic grocery bag. She'd aged years and months, the golden child glow completely extinguished. She tried to speak, but I held up my hand. Told her she could say whatever she needed to say to Grandma's headstone, but not to me. That this was sacred ground, and I wouldn't have it polluted with more lies and manipulation. She started crying real tears this time, ugly sobbing about how sorry she was, how she'd lost everything, how she finally understood. I left without engaging further. But I heard later from my aunt that Chloe had spent 3 hours at that grave talking to our grandmother, confessing everything. Not just about Marcus, but about years of jealousy and spite. About how she'd hated me for being competent when she felt like a failure. About how destroying my happiness had been her goal for longer than anyone realized. Marcus's pattern, as I'd predicted, repeated with his next victim. A woman from his new job reached out to me through LinkedIn about 8 months after everything. She'd Googled him after some red flags and found the whole story. She thanked me for having the courage to expose him publicly. Said she was leaving him immediately and would warn every woman in their office. Patricia Marcus's mother stayed in touch with me. She'd essentially adopted me as the daughter she'd wished she'd had, instead of the son who'd disappointed her so profoundly. We had lunch monthly, and she filled the mother-shaped hole my own mom's favoritism had left. She told me Marcus had tried to come home for Christmas, but she'd turned him away. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt. The 1-year anniversary of finding them approached with less dread than I'd expected. Lauren organized a celebration, calling it my Independence Day. Friends who'd supported me through the worst gathered at my newly redecorated house. We toasted with champagne and new crystal glasses, nothing from my life with Marcus remaining to taint the celebration. That night someone asked if I regretted how I'd handled things. If I wished I'd just kick them out immediately instead of the elaborate revenge plan. I thought about it seriously before answering. No, I didn't regret a single moment. They'd planned to humiliate me slowly, privately, letting me discover their betrayal after I was trapped. Instead, I'd expose them completely publicly with no room for denial or spin. A year and a half later, I met Benjamin at the hiking group. He was genuinely kind with no hidden agenda. Worked as a park ranger, lived simply, had no interest in status or image. He liked me in hiking boots with no makeup, sweaty, and talking excitedly about the red-tailed hawk we'd spotted. He didn't need me to be successful or stable or useful. He just enjoyed my company. We took things incredibly slowly. I was upfront about my past, showed him the viral Twitter thread on our third date. He read it all, looked at me with respect, and said I was the strongest person he'd ever met. But he also understood why I needed time, why trust would have to be earned in increments, why certain boundaries were non-negotiable. Benjamin never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He met my parents only after 8 months of dating and immediately won them over by treating me like the priority, not charming them, while ignoring me like Marcus had. He asked my father about my childhood accomplishments, not Chloe's art. He helped my mother cook while praising the daughter who'd actually achieved things. When he met Patricia at one of our lunches, she grilled him like a protective mother should. He answered every question honestly, even admitting he'd been intimidated by my story but drawn to my strength. Patricia approved, saying he had something Marcus never did. Genuine humility and real respect for women as equals, not as resources to exploit. 2 years after the bathroom incident, I ran into an old mutual friend who'd stayed neutral through everything. She mentioned that Marcus was engaged again. The woman was young, fresh out of college from a wealthy family. The pattern was so predictable it was almost sad. I made a note to have Madison do some strategic social media placement to warn the poor girl, then forgot about it entirely. Chloe, from what I heard through family gossip, never recovered her artistic aspirations. She worked minimum wage jobs, lived in a studio apartment in a bad part of town, and had alienated most of her remaining friends with her victim mentality. She'd tried to reconcile with our parents, but the damage was too deep. They supported her having housing and food, but nothing more. The golden child had become the cautionary tale. Meanwhile, I flourished, got promoted to regional director, bought a bigger house in a better neighborhood, traveled to 14 countries in 2 years, learned to paint, ironically, and turned out to have actual talent that had been overshadowed by Chloe's manufactured artistic persona. My life became fuller than I'd ever imagined it could be. The bathroom itself became somewhat famous in my friend group. People would ask to see the scene of the crime when they visited. I'd give tours like it was a historical landmark, pointing out where I'd stood, where the skeleton key had hung, where justice had been served. It became a symbol not of betrayal, but of transformation. The place where pushover Ruby died and Phoenix Ruby was born. 3 years after that day, Benjamin proposed during a sunrise hike at the spot where we'd first really talked. No fancy restaurant, no public display, just us in the mountains, and a ring he'd had made from ethically sourced stones. I said yes immediately. No hesitation, no doubt. This was what real love felt like. Quiet, steady, sure, and absolutely nothing like the performance Marcus and I had enacted. Our wedding was small, intimate, and perfect. 30 people who genuinely loved us, not the 300 Marcus had wanted to impress. Patricia sat in the mother of the groom spot, having formally adopted me in heart, if not legally. My parents walked me down the aisle together, finally united in putting me first. Tom and his wife attended, living proof that betrayal could lead to better things. Chloe wasn't invited, obviously, but I heard she'd tried to crash the wedding. Security, warned in advance, turned her away at the gate. She'd made a scene claiming family should be forgiven, that I was being cruel. The security guard, who'd heard the whole story, simply said that actions have consequences and escorted her off the property. It was the last time she tried to contact me directly. Marcus's story ended pathetically. His second engagement fell apart when the bride's family hired a private investigator. His pattern of financial manipulation and serial cheating was documented thoroughly. He fled Ohio for Florida, then Texas, burning bridges everywhere he went. Last anyone heard, he was selling used cars in Arizona, a far cry from the pharmaceutical executive he'd pretended to be. The lessons from that day in the bathroom became my guide for life. Trust but verify. Believe patterns over words. Never ignore your instincts. Stand up for yourself, even if it means standing alone. And most importantly, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time and act accordingly. Looking back now, 5 years later, I realized that finding them in that bathtub was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because betrayal is good, but because it forced me to stop accepting less than I deserved. It taught me that I was capable of standing up for myself in ways I'd never imagined. It showed me who really cared about me when the facade fell away. The scared, trusting girl who'd climbed those stairs that day was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth and wouldn't compromise it for anyone. Who understood that family isn't about blood, but about loyalty. Who'd learned that the best revenge isn't just living well, but ensuring that those who wronged you can never forget the price of their betrayal. Sometimes the best gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they are when they think you're not able to fight back. Marcus and Chloe gave me that gift in my own bathroom in my own home, with my grandmother's ring barely a room away. They thought they were taking something from me. Instead, they freed me to become who I was always meant to be. And I sleep perfectly fine every single night, knowing that somewhere out there, Marcus is remembering the successful life he threw away for a few months of sneaking around. Knowing that Chloe is understanding that being the golden child means nothing when you have no gold left in your character. They made their choices in that bathtub,